They called them flying fortresses, majestic beasts of the sky, designed to strike fear into the heart of the enemy. But in the brutal crucible of World War II, over the gray, flak-riddled skies of Nazi-occupied Europe, these symbols of American industrial might were bleeding. Not just from German bullets, though there were plenty of those, but from a silent, insidious enemy. A design flaw so deceptively simple, yet catastrophically lethal, that it threatened to cripple the entire strategic bombing campaign. This is the story of how an unapproved trick, born from desperation and the stark reality of combat, transformed the B-17 from a vulnerable target into almost an unkillable legend, saving thousands of lives and ultimately helping to win the war. Imagine this. May 29th, 1943. The early morning fog hangs heavy over RAF Alconbury, England. 7 experimental YB-40 flying fortresses, bristling with an unprecedented 1650 caliber machine guns, sit on the hardstands. Their crews, fresh-faced but already etched with the strain of war, conduct their final pre-flight checks. These were supposed to be the saviors, the answer to a problem that had plagued the 8th Air Force since day one. The absolute slaughter of American airmen deep over Germany, far beyond the reach of their short-ranged fighter escorts. The YB-40s were bomber killers, designed to fly as heavily armed escorts for the standard B-17s, a desperate gamble to make the self-defending bomber formation doctrine finally work. But instead of providing a solution, these super gunships would expose the B-17's most glaring, deadly secret. A secret that had been systematically killing American airmen for months, often without a single shot fired by the enemy. The problem wasn't a sophisticated piece of German engineering, nor was it a failure of pilot skill or gunner bravery. It was far more fundamental, a flaw baked into the very blueprint of the B-17 itself, especially apparent in its E and F models. Tucked away in the narrow fuselage, 2 waist gunners stood directly opposite each other, each manning a flexible 50 caliber machine gun through an open window on either side of the aircraft. On paper, it seemed logical. Double the firepower, cover both flanks. In reality, it was a death trap. Picture the scene. 25,000 feet above the earth. A desolate, unforgiving realm where the air thins and the mercury plunges to 60 degrees below zero. Inside the bomber, the roar of 4 radial engines is deafening, shaking the very bones of the aircraft. Your body is swaddled in layers, bulky, sheepskin-lined suits, heavy flak armor weighing a solid 30 pounds, a parachute harness that digs into your shoulders. Your breath freezes in the air, forming ghostly plumes. Suddenly, the world explodes. Flak bursts punctuate the sky with black, venomous clouds. German fighters, the sleek Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s, appear like vengeful wraiths, slashing through the formation, their cannon fire tearing through aluminum and flesh. In this maelstrom, these 2 waist gunners, these young men often barely out of their teens, are trying to defend their bomber. The enemy is coming from the beam, attacking from the side, a favored tactic. They pivot. They strain, their gloved hands gripping the handles of their machine guns, eyes scanning the dizzying dance of steel and smoke. But the B-17's fuselage at that point was barely 10 feet wide, tapering towards the tail. Each gunner, burdened by his layers of gear, by the adrenaline pumping through his veins, by the desperate need to track a fast-moving German fighter, would inevitably, tragically, collide with his comrade. It wasn't just an awkward bump. These were violent, desperate collisions in a cramped, freezing, oxygen-deprived metal tube. An oxygen line, vital for life at that altitude, would get snagged, yanked free. Within minutes, hypoxia would set in. Confusion, dizziness, a slow, silent slip into unconsciousness, then death. Ammunition belts, the lifelines of their defense, would tangle, jamming the mighty 50 calibers at the most critical moment, leaving the bomber defenseless. Men were dying, not from German bullets, but from their own inability to fight back, victims of a fundamentally flawed design that hadn't been adequately tested for the crucible of combat. This wasn't just an occasional occurrence, it was a systemic issue. The statistical analysis from the 8th Air Force's Operational Research Section painted a horrifying picture. In early 1943, the average B-17 survived a mere 11 combat missions before being destroyed. With a full combat tour requiring 25 missions, the probability of survival for an airman was a gut-wrenching 27%. Those numbers translated into empty bunks in Nissan huts across East Anglia, into personal effects being boxed up and shipped home to grieving families in small American towns, and into a desperate, unending stream of replacement crews arriving from training bases faster than they could be adequately prepared for the hell they were about to face. The crisis had been brewing since the 8th Air Force began operations in August 1942. The pre-war doctrine, developed at the Air Corps Tactical School at Maxwell Field, Alabama, was a triumph of theoretical optimism over grim reality. It preached that massive defensive firepower from tightly packed bomber formations would make daylight precision bombing viable without fighter escort. Untested in the cauldron of large-scale combat, this theory was proving catastrophically, tragically wrong. German fighter pilots, seasoned veterans of the Eastern Front, had no such theoretical constraints. They were ruthless pragmatists. They quickly developed tactics that exploited every weakness in the flying fortress's defenses. The waist gun positions, designed in the late 1930s under peacetime conditions and never subjected to the sustained, brutal combat encountered over Germany, were the most glaring vulnerability. They were a blind spot, a chink in the armor, and the Luftwaffe exploited it with deadly efficiency. The B-17E and F models, the backbone of the early bombing campaigns, carried those two unfortunate waist gunners. Each was armed with a flexible Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, firing through open windows approximately 2 feet by 3 feet. Think about that for a moment. Open windows at 25,000 feet, at 60 degrees below zero, with a 200 mph slipstream howling through. This wasn't just cold, it was an active assault on the human body. Exposed skin would flash freeze in seconds. Ice would form on gun mechanisms, oxygen regulators, and ammunition feeds, turning vital equipment into brittle, unreliable machines. Gunners layered silk gloves under wool gloves, under leather gloves, under electrically heated mittens, yet still lost fingers to frostbite when forced to clear gun jams with bare hands, a desperate act of survival that cost them pieces of themselves. Combat reports from early 1943 told a grim story. During the January 27th raid on Wilhelmshaven, the very first American attack on Germany itself, waist gunners explicitly reported severe difficulties engaging enemy fighters due to mutual interference. They were literally getting in each other's way. Just over a month later, on March 6th, during the critical attack on the Schweinfurt ball-bearing works, a raid that would go down in history as one of the costliest, multiple B-17s were unable to defend against beam attacks because their waist gunners had become hopelessly entangled during violent evasive maneuvers. The aircraft, precious and vulnerable, plunged from the sky, its crew unable to deliver even a token defense, not because of lack of courage, but because of a flaw in the very design meant to protect them. This dire situation birthed the YB-40 program in September 1942, a temporary, desperate measure to bridge the gap until long-range fighters like the P-51 Mustang could enter service. Lockheed's Vega subsidiary was tasked with converting standard B-17Fs into these heavily armed gunships. The modifications were extensive. An additional Sperry dorsal turret in the radio compartment, twin gun mounts replacing the single waist guns, a Bendix chin turret under the nose, and the bomb bay converted entirely into an ammunition magazine holding 11,000 rounds. Additional armor plating promised greater protection. The hope was palpable. The first 13 YB-40s arrived at RAF Alconbury in early May 1943, assigned exclusively to the 92nd Bomb Group's 327th Squadron. But training exercises revealed immediate, disheartening problems. The enhanced waist positions, with their twin gun mounts, instead of doubling firepower, actually worsened the space problem. Gunners repeatedly collided and fouled their equipment during mock combat, a grim preview of what awaited them. The combat debut on May 29, 1943, targeting the submarine pens at Saint-Nazaire, France, was a profound disappointment. 7 YB-40s accompanied 96 standard B-17s. The gunships struggled to maintain formation after the bombers dropped their loads, a critical failure in their escort role. But most critically, combat reports from that day specifically documented severe problems with crew coordination at the waist positions. Post-mission debriefings revealed that gunners had been unable to effectively engage German fighters attacking from the beam. The YB-40, the Great Hope, was not only failing in its primary mission, but also exacerbating the very problem it was supposed to solve. Then came tragedy. June 22, 1943, during a raid on the synthetic rubber plant at Hüls, Germany, YB-40 serial number 42-5735, a symbol of American ingenuity and desperation, was destroyed. Its waist gunners, it was determined, had been unable to provide effective defensive fire due to mutual interference. The investigation confirmed that this was not an isolated incident. It was a systemic failure, a flaw in the very heart of their flying fortress. The after-action reports, stark and uncompromising, landed simultaneously on the desks of multiple commands. At Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, the Air Technical Service Command began a furious analysis of the tactical failures. At Boeing's Plant 2 in Seattle, Chief Engineer Edward Curtis Wells assembled a dedicated team to address the grim combat reports. Douglas Aircraft's Modification Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, began experimenting with actual aircraft, trying to find a fix. But perhaps most significantly, the United Airlines Modification Center at Cheyenne, Wyoming, a facility established specifically to implement combat improvements with unparalleled speed, began systematic testing of alternatives. This was where the tide would begin to turn. The atmosphere in these centers must have been charged with a desperate urgency. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The lives of countless young men, the viability of the entire strategic bombing campaign, perhaps even the outcome of the war. Engineers, mechanics, and former airmen pored over blueprints, interviewed returning crews, and simulated combat scenarios, searching for a solution to a problem that seemed so obvious in retrospect, yet had remained stubbornly invisible in peacetime design. And then it emerged. A solution so elegant in its simplicity, so profoundly effective in its execution, that it's almost poetic. Stagger the waist gun windows. By moving the left window forward and the right window aft by approximately 3 feet, each gunner gained his own dedicated operating zone. Suddenly, they could track targets without fear of collision. They could feed ammunition belts without interference. This wasn't a radical redesign of the entire aircraft. It was a minimal structural change, but it promised a maximum improvement in combat effectiveness. It was the kind of ingenuity born only from the pressure of life and death, a testament to the fact that sometimes The most profound solutions are found in the most straightforward adjustments. The first B-17 with these experimental staggered waist windows underwent combat testing in early July 1943. The results were immediate and dramatic. Gunners who had previously wrestled with their comrades and their equipment reported significant, almost unbelievable increases in their ability to track and engage targets. Incidents of equipment interference dropped to near zero. The unapproved trick, because such a fundamental alteration would have gone through endless bureaucratic channels in peacetime, was proving to be a stroke of genius. But staggering alone didn't solve every problem. The gunners were still operating in open windows, still exposed to the devastating slipstream and the soul-numbing cold. The complete solution, the one that would truly transform the waist positions into functional, formidable combat stations, combined those staggered positions with enclosed windows, featuring robust plexiglass panels and rotating gun mounts. This was the Cheyenne configuration, a name that would become synonymous with wartime innovation. It provided vital environmental protection, reducing frostbite and allowing gunners to operate more effectively and for longer periods. It turned a death trap into a fortress, literally. Douglas Aircraft was the first to implement the staggered window modification on late production B-17F aircraft in August 1943. Boeing, never one to be outdone and acutely aware of the urgency, immediately incorporated the change into their new B-17G model, with the first production aircraft rolling off the line on August 30th. Lockheed Vega quickly followed suit. The B-17G, born from the bitter lessons of 1943, represented more than just improved waist positions. It was a culmination of every combat lesson learned during those bloody air battles. The Bendix chin turret provided crucial frontal defense against head-on attacks, a tactic German pilots had begun to favor. The tail position was redesigned with larger windows and improved fields of fire. Together, these modifications transformed the Flying Fortress into the most heavily armed bomber of the war. The speed of this transformation is astounding. Think of the logistical and industrial challenge. To identify a critical flaw, devise a solution, test it, and then implement it across thousands of complex aircraft, all while the war raged on and production lines ran 24 hours a day. It speaks volumes about the American capacity for rapid adaptation and industrial flexibility. Boeing's Seattle plant alone would go on to produce 8,080 B-17Gs. Douglas Long Beach built 395. Lockheed Vega manufactured 2,250. Every single one of these aircraft incorporated the staggered waist window design, along with a host of other combat-driven improvements. This wasn't just fixing a problem. It was an evolution, a continuous feedback loop between the battlefield and the factory floor. The effectiveness of this transformation was almost immediately documented in combat reports from autumn 1943. During the October 8th attack on Bremen and Vegasack, B-17Gs with modified waist positions claimed significantly more fighter kills than the older F models still in service. More importantly, they suffered fewer losses to beam attacks, precisely what the modifications were designed to prevent. Then came October 14th, 1943, Black Thursday. The second Schweinfurt raid, a mission synonymous with unparalleled aerial carnage. 60 B-17s were lost out of 291 dispatched, a staggering casualty rate that almost halted the strategic bombing campaign. But even amidst this disaster, analysis revealed a glimmer of hope. Newer B-17G models, those equipped with the defensive improvements, suffered proportionally lower losses than the older F models. The modifications were proving their worth, even in the deadliest air battles. The difference between survival and oblivion was literally a matter of a few feet. Perhaps the most compelling validation came from the enemy itself. Luftwaffe after-action reports confirmed the impact of the American modifications. Major Hans Philipp, commanding Jagdgeschwader 1, a renowned fighter wing, noted in October 1943 that American bombers had become noticeably more difficult to attack. The waist guns, once a point of vulnerability, now delivered disciplined and accurate fire, with gunners able to track fighters smoothly through their entire attack approach. The Germans, masters of aerial combat, were forced to adapt their tactics, a clear indication of the success of the B-17's evolution. They developed the Wurfgranate 21 rocket mortar for standoff attacks, allowing them to engage bombers from a safer distance, and created heavily armored Sturmbach assault fighters specifically designed to absorb punishment and close in on B-17 formations. The very fact that specialized weapons and tactics were needed to counter the flying fortress demonstrated the profound effectiveness of these modifications. By December 1943, the transformation had a tangible impact on strategic planning. The 8th Air Force could now plan deeper penetration missions, knowing their bombers had significantly improved survivability. General Ira Eaker reported to General Henry Arnold that the modifications had materially improved their ability to conduct strategic operations. The impact extended beyond hardware. Training curricula at gunnery schools were revised to account for the new positions. At Kingman Army Airfield in Arizona, instructors noted that the staggered positions meant gunners could finally apply complex deflection shooting techniques effectively, turning theoretical knowledge into practical, life-saving skill. The influence wasn't limited to the B-17. The B-24 Liberator, another workhorse of the bomber fleet, incorporated similar staggered waist positions in its late production models. And the B-29 Superfortress, still in development, benefited immensely from these lessons, ultimately featuring remotely controlled turrets that eliminated crew exposure entirely, a direct evolution from the experiences of the B-17 gunners. January 11, 1944, offered a stark demonstration of these cumulative effects. 600 B-17s attacked German aircraft factories. Despite incomplete fighter escort, losses remained manageable. The majority of the aircraft lost were older F models, while the G models showed remarkable survivability. This wasn't just luck, it was design. The Big Week operations in February 1944 further solidified the strategic impact. Over 3,000 bomber sorties struck German aircraft production. Despite fierce Luftwaffe opposition, losses remained sustainable. The improved defensive capabilities had shifted the attrition balance decisively, allowing the Allies to pound German industry relentlessly. Lieutenant General James Doolittle, taking command of the 8th Air Force in January 1944, understood the profound implication. Modified B-17Gs could better defend themselves. This crucial insight allowed him to fundamentally change fighter doctrine. Instead of forcing escort fighters to stay glued to the bomber formations, Doolittle freed them to pursue German fighters aggressively, hunting them down wherever they could be found. This combination, self-defending bombers and aggressive escorts, proved devastating to the Luftwaffe, a 1-2 punch that broke the back of the German Air Force. The first American daylight raid on Berlin, March 4, 1944, showcased this new reality. 730 B-17s and B-24s struck the Nazi capital. The 95th Bomb Group, equipped entirely with B-17Gs, lost only 3 aircraft while claiming 17 German fighters destroyed, despite facing over 200 German fighters. By spring 1944, the 8th Air Force could maintain sustained operations. The ability to mount 1,000 bomber raids with acceptable losses meant the systematic destruction of German industrial capacity was now a viable strategy. The critical oil plan and transportation plan, designed to cripple Germany's war machine, became achievable because bombers could survive the required missions. D-Day operations in June 1944 provided the ultimate showcase for this transformation. The 8th Air Force flew over 2,000 bomber sorties supporting the invasion. Despite intense opposition, only 26 bombers were lost from all causes. The B-17G had become a reliable weapons platform, a true fortress in the sky, capable of delivering its payload and returning home. By summer 1944, the Luftwaffe faced an impossible equation. American bombers were harder to kill, while American industrial might ensure that production immediately replaced any losses. The staggered waste windows and other modifications had contributed to a virtuous cycle for the Allies and a death spiral for Germany. Improved defenses meant more bombers survived, requiring more German fighters to attack them, resulting in more German losses. This relentless pressure systematically eroded the Luftwaffe's strength and morale. The most poignant testament to this engineering triumph comes from the human dimension, vividly demonstrated in tour completion statistics. In early 1943, completing 25 missions seemed like a distant, impossible dream for most airmen. By mid-1944, crews were routinely completing 35 mission tours. The survival probability had more than doubled. This wasn't just about saving machines. It was about saving lives, allowing young men to return home to their families. August 1944 brought official validation from German technical intelligence. Their examination of a crashed B-17G noted that the offset waist positions indeed provided effective beam defense. The accumulated modifications had transformed the aircraft from a vulnerable target to a formidable opponent, a machine that commanded respect, even from its enemies. Production continued relentlessly, a testament to American industrial power. Boeing's Plant 2, employing 44,000 workers at its peak, produced 16 B-17Gs daily. This ability to rapidly identify problems, develop solutions, and implement improvements across thousands of production aircraft within months created a weapon system that evolved faster than its enemies could adapt. It wasn't just about quantity, it was about quality born from relentless improvement. October 1944 brought another milestone when B-17Gs successfully engaged German jet fighters. Despite the Me-262's phenomenal speed advantage, waist gunners damaged several jets, proving that improved conventional defenses remained relevant even against revolutionary new technology. The Christmas Eve mission of December 24, 1944, became the largest airstrike of the war, with 2,034 bombers striking Western Germany. Despite the massive scale and desperate German resistance, including jet fighters, proportional losses remained lower than small raids in early 1943. The evolution was complete. On February 3, 1945, nearly 1,000 B-17s flew over Berlin. Despite everything Germany could muster in its dying days, only 21 bombers were lost. What would have been catastrophic losses in 1943 was now considered acceptable attrition. The last B-17G rolled off Boeing's production line on April 13, 1945. Serial number 4485974 represented the culmination of a combat-driven design evolution, a machine forged in the fires of aerial warfare. April 25, 1945, marked the final bombing mission, with B-17Gs attacking Czech arms factories without a single loss. The modifications had worked. The combat lessons had been applied. The investment in blood and ingenuity had paid dividends in victory. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded that the B-17's evolution, particularly the defensive position improvements, contributed materially to achieving air superiority. Staggered waist positions, combined with the chin turret and other enhancements, transformed aircraft survivability. Financial accounting further revealed the immense value of these modifications. $20 million invested in modifications prevented the loss of 800 aircraft worth $190 million, not to mention the invaluable trained crews. The return on investment exceeded 10 to 1, a clear demonstration that prioritizing the lives of airmen also made sound strategic and economic sense. The technical legacy extended far beyond World War II. Every military aircraft designed since has incorporated lessons from the B-17 modifications. Crew workspace, environmental protection, and optimized fields of fire became fundamental tenets of aviation human factors engineering, forever changing how we design cockpits and crew stations. The comfort and effectiveness of modern combat crews owe a debt to those freezing, struggling gunners of 1943. Veterans consistently emphasized the modifications' importance. At reunions, waist gunners would often testify to the stark difference between the earlier F and later G models. Simple changes like offset windows meant the difference between life and death. Today, a dozen B-17Gs remain airworthy worldwide, symbols of a bygone era. Visitors who tour these magnificent aircraft often notice those distinctive offset waist windows, a silent testament to how combat experience drove innovation, how industrial flexibility provided a decisive advantage, and how simple modifications produced profoundly world-altering results. General Karl Spaatz, a towering figure in American air power, provided perhaps the most fitting final assessment. The B-17G was designed not in factories, but in combat. Every improvement, every refinement came from crews who identified weaknesses through terrible, often fatal, experience. The staggered waist windows and other modifications transformed a flawed bomber into a war-winning weapon. This transformation demonstrates the remarkable American capacity for rapid adaptation based on battlefield feedback. While Germany often produced technically superior individual aircraft, they simply could not match America's ability to identify problems, develop solutions, and implement changes across thousands of production aircraft within a matter of months. The flying fortress that ultimately helped destroy the Third Reich was not just a marvel of engineering. It was a testament to collective experience, refined by the sacrifices of thousands of airmen and perfected through the harsh, uncompromising selection of aerial combat. Those offset waist windows, that simple, unapproved trick, saved countless lives and helped secure victory. It's a powerful lesson in problem-solving under pressure, in the profound impact of listening to those on the front lines, and in the enduring truth that sometimes the simplest adjustment can lead to the most revolutionary change. Victory through adaptation. That is the true, untold story of how America won the air war over Europe. One small, yet immensely significant, modification at a time.